Hello, this is the last chapter in the Wireless Security CWSP Guide to Wireless Security Certified Wireless Security Professional. Talk a little bit about operational support and wireless convergence. A number of the protocols that he's going to talk about, or actually when we get into the cellular to the wireless to the 2G, 3G, 4G, are a little bit out of date. The processes, procedures that we would use really aren't out of date. So the objectives here list the features of a secure and scalable wireless local area network. Secure, big deal. Scalable, big deal in an enterprise, because we want to be able to add users when we do these things. The functions of wireless operational support: explain WLAN, WiMAX, and 3G convergence. 3G should now be 4G when we do these things. Scalable, able to accommodate growth. If we had small wireless access points, home wireless access points, we'd be limited, and any of them were actually limited in the numbers that we have. We want to be able to add access points and still be able to authenticate to them, and that's where radius server, which we've previously discussed, comes in, and that's where VLANs are going to come in. We'll talk about them. Wireless VLANs, wired VLANs. Wireless VLANs typically going to be associated with an SSID so that we can allow particular users to access a particular portion of the network, to get into their area and only their area. WLAN that's been designed from the outset to be secure and scalable is going to be a whole lot easier to manage than one that you keep trying to patch. Provide the foundation to thwart attacks if we understand our network, where our network is, what security we've applied, and how that security works is going to be in a lot better shape than if we maybe inherit a network that we don't know really where it is and keep chasing after problems. Keep running them down, and that's all we're doing is putting out brush fires, and that's what you really don't want to do. You want to be able to set the system up, make it secure, and then manage that security. A scalable, one of the most important elements in a scalable and secure WLAN, and this is continuous intrusion monitoring and containment. We talk about intrusion prevention systems and intrusion IDS and IPS. IDS detects, records, and the old saying is, when you have an IDS, you get the two IT guys standing around the water cooler, and one of them says, "Hey, did you see that cool attack yesterday?" An IDS does not stop an attack, it only records the attack and what happened there. An intrusion prevention system stops the attack. We can configure those to help us out. And a wireless has IDSs and IPSs just like wired has them. WLAN can be accomplished via a standard management protocol, system specifically designed for the wireless access networks. Sorry about that. And there are a number of commercial devices that you can get to do the wireless intrusion or wireless intrusion protection or detection. One of them is Airtight, and here's their image on what they do. We have authorized APs, misconfigured, denial of service, authorized clients, what we're going to do. And in this case, authorized clients go to authorized APs. Unauthorized clients are hopefully going to be stopped in these things. Give my little drawer out. I know that everybody loves that. Authorized clients are going to go through and get to the correct location. Unauthorized clients are hopefully going to be stopped. Neighbor clients, and we can ignore these things. Neighbor APs, and these things are going to try to detect rogue access points and are going to block the rogue access points and the neighboring access points, only going to allow communication on the systems that are supposed to be having communication with the system. So Dedicated WLAN management systems, discovery tools continuously monitor for RF attacks. One of the quick and easy, dirty, whatever ways to do a denial of service attack on a wireless network is to attack the frequency, the 2.4 gigahertz. If we can put enough noise on the network, we can bring it down. There obviously are other ways to do that. Video teleconference or something like that's going to take up a tremendous amount of bandwidth and do those things. But from an RF standpoint, are there RF attacks on the system? Are there inadvertent RF attacks on the system, such as somebody brought in a microwave oven and is using their popcorn, popping their popcorn? That could actually bring down, if it's close enough to the access point, could bring down your wireless. Continuous monitoring, wireless, and as we talked about, wireless intrusion and wireless intrusion prevention, intrusion detection systems for these things. Authentication. In authentication, I think we have talked about wireless authentication. When you authenticate, you prove who you are. So we have authentication and access, two different processes. Authentication is you prove who you are, and authorization is what you can actually get access to once you've been authenticated. And we're going to verify who the user is, and what role-based access does is, instead of trying to manage individuals as individuals, we have roles that we set up that we're going to put them in the role to allow that. And one of the things that they talk about, administrator, is going to be a role. In the Windows world, unless something's changed dramatically recently, there's no role object in Active Directory. If you go to the netware world, there is a role object in the NDS, the netware data system. What you can do in Windows is set up your roles as groups and then add users to that group when they should get access to it. Where I work, we have faculty, and we have students, and we have administrators. So we have groups which effectively become the roles that give access to the baseline resources of each of those groupings of individuals. Those roles are required. And then after you get the gross permissions assigned, you can go in and tweak individually or tweak smaller groups to allow that to happen. Access control, again, limiting access to resources, what you can actually get to, what you can use, what you can see. We have a color printer somewhere on our network that I can't use and my students can't use, but certain of the administrators can use because they need to do presentations with it. So limit control to individuals, and we can do that with membership in various groups. And here we're mixing, I think, role and groups depending on which objects you have. You can have either a role object or use a group in order to effectively become a role. Role-based, easier to establish permissions based on the job classification, major step in keeping the WLAN secure. What can they do? If we use 802.1x, and if you watch that video, we made a group in Active Directory that could log on to the wireless. Once those individuals got logged on to the wireless, then Active Directory would take into account what resources they could actually access. So we can get logged into Active Directory, use the Active Directory information about the individual users and the groups that they're a member of in order to give access to resources. Traffic filtering is certainly one way to manage what goes on the system. Traffic filtering, what we're going to allow in and what we're not going to allow in, what we're going to allow in and allow out on the systems themselves. What I want to do to kind of show what that is to bring in an interface on a Cisco AeroNet 1200. This is an older AeroNet, but we have in here filters, and this may take a few seconds for it to actually get there. This has not been the fastest thing in the world. And we have filters incoming. We have MAC address filtering, IP filters up here, and Ethernet filters. So MAC address, if we did MAC filters, we could go into it. A filter index is going to be a number, and then add MAC addresses to it. And down here we can add multiple MAC addresses. And then we have the action. We can either forward or block each of those. And then up here we can do IP filters. When we do IP filters, we have the filter name, the default action to block, the destination address, and the mask, which means that we could filter individual addresses, or we could filter a block of addresses to allow or deny, permit, source address, whatever we want to do in here, number of filters. IP protocols, if we have those, there are drop down boxes here for some pre-configured things. If that doesn't work, we can go in and do our custom ports, TCP ports and UDP ports down here. And we go over to the action, same action. We're going to have action to either forward or block. So we can filter inbound and outbound on the wireless access point. Sometimes outbound filtering is important as inbound filtering. What do you or don't you want to allow users to get to? Do you want them to be able to become a member of a bot army? So basic filtering, address filtering, data filtering, protocol filtering, the things that we just looked at, can be configured to filter traffic, as we just saw. Difficult for an attacker to circumvent. IP address filtering is kind of, we can spoof an IP address. The problem with spoofing an IP address is when you get the response, it goes back to the IP address that you spoof, so you may never see the answer. You've got to use the spoofed addresses to do things that you don't actually need a response for. Strong encryption. We've gone through the whole WEP thing, and WEP obviously is a very weak protocol, WEP to WPA, which was an intermediate step with a TKIP, temporal key integrity protocol, which put a different key on each packet, and that helped a lot. Up to WPA2, WPA2 Enterprise, using AES and Radius server in order to authenticate users onto the wireless access point. And remember, when we're doing these things, we're not letting users onto our network, we're letting them onto the access point. After we get there, then we've got to think about how we're going to protect the rest of the resources that are available to that access point. One of them may be through using VLAN, so that we only allow users to get to the internet if they're on that, or we make them get onto different VLANs so that they can only access particular resources on the network. WEP, again, we don't want to use 802.11i is the standard for security, and we have WPA, WPA2. WPA2 obviously is the protocol of choice, since it's going to be the most secure, and uses the AES encryption protocol. Scalable, strong authentication, the ability to grow. You really need to use something other than a pre-shared key. We can obviously use those, and in a small network it works just fine, but if we're in a larger network, the pre-shared key is going to remain a secret probably for maybe 5 or 10 minutes before somebody allows somebody else to know what the key is, or if they post it on their workstation or something like that. We want to be able to use something like a Radius server. Element of secure and scalable WLAN is scalable authentication. WPA and Enterprise and WPA2 Enterprise utilize the 802.1x port-based authentication, which we have talked about previously, and there's a couple of demos on how to actually configure that through Windows 7 and a Windows Server 2008 Radius server, and then I have an earlier video that shows it how to configure it using XP and Server 2003. Remote authentication dial-in user service has become the preferred. It works very well in order to do this. And when we do this, we have, get my arrow back here again maybe, we have our supplicant, or not, our supplicant here, which is going to be in historically what we've called the client. The client is actually going to be the wireless access point, and then we have the authentication server, the radius server, the radius client. Okay, well, let's go here. The radius device sends its credentials, radius server, which then get forwarded to the radius server. Radius server is then going to check some sort of a database like Active Directory to see if we've put the correct credentials in. If that's the case, it's going to go back and say, okay, you can have access. The radius 802.1x can be used as a wired as well as a wireless protocol. So we can use those in order to have a protocol that is scalable, because we just keep adding users. Segment network design. Segmentation is dividing the network into smaller areas, obviously smaller units. Let me bring this in, give a visual of what we might see there. In this case, we've got and we'll call this a layer 3 switch up here, and we have a wireless access point. SSID 1, VLAN 1, and you have users log in, and when they get logged into SSID 1, then they are on VLAN 1, and they can only access resources on VLAN 1 unless we route them to other VLANs. So, and if we just used a layer 2 switch, then they would be restricted to the resources that were actually on that single network. So VLANs, let me get a freehand here, maybe. VLANs we can set up so that we get on VLAN 1, we'll go to the access point, it goes through the switch and can only access resources on VLAN 1. VLAN 2 to VLAN 2, and VLAN 3 to 3, and 4 to 4. If we wanted the VLANs to talk to each other, then we would have to have a router in here that allowed them to access resources on the other networks. A little visual there of VLANs and SSIDs. Gateways, routers, switches, firewalls, DMZs, all sorts of ways to isolate or to segment a network. We can segment with it, we can segment at the layer 2 or say segment at layer 3. Physically, if we had different switches and we only plugged resources into a particular switch and didn't have anything connecting them together, then we would have total segmentation. Virtual local area networks, where we electronically break up a switch and put different machines, different clients, we'll call them clients now again, on the different local area networks, or virtual local area networks, allow us to get our separation there. And if we use a router or a layer 3 switch, we can route among those, or between those, among those if we have more than one. This just shows wireless segmentation. We have different access points. We may or may not allow any traffic between any of the access points. Fast handoff, the original 802.11 didn't specify the fast handoff, which is important for roaming users, particularly if you're using voice as a roaming user. So when we do that, the 802.11f specified information that they need to exchange during the WLAN roaming. There's still some issues with roaming between different manufacturers. So if you're going to use roaming, you probably really want to have access points from the same manufacturer. Determine the quality of service and the security being used. Add a different AP before making the transition. The characteristics, and these are the characteristics of a secure and stable wireless local area network. Continuous intrusion monitoring, role-based access, traffic filtering, strong encryption, scalable authentication, segmented network design, and fast handoff are going to be things that we want this system to have. Operational support, they don't work on their own. Operational support, and to me, all of this stuff, security is kind of like paying attention to what's going on. What are we going to use over these things? So the basic tasks, monitoring, configuration management, user training. User training is something that many of us fall short on, and we really do need to have a properly briefed, educated user base. And it makes our life much easier if the users kind of have an idea of what's going on. Monitoring, RF interference, jamming, location of access points, and identification of unauthorized users are all things that we want to be able to do. There are some tools that we can have in order to do that. Quick and dirty here, and I think this is from Geeks. We're showing an analyzer here, a spectrum analyzer for 2.4 gigahertz. It shows our channels, and down here how much traffic is indicated on the channels. This is called a heat map down here. The red means there's lots of traffic. The yellow building to red, and green kind of not nearly as much traffic on the systems. So what we want to do is be able to identify that and identify RF interference, where the RF interference is coming from. And again, that can be something as simple as microwave oven, wireless joysticks, other kinds of wireless devices, wireless not cellular but wireless telephones. All of those things can create issues for us. Settings can be used to identify AP settings, coverage, network performance, security audits, all of those kinds of things. And there are maps that you can get. What kind of access points do you have, and we'll give you a projection of where you need to put them based on the types of walls. And remember that this whole network can change if somebody puts in a wall, somebody moves something around, and in some cases the way that it's reflected, if somebody just parks a car in a different location, or fills up a parking lot or empties a parking lot. I was reading an article one time about setting up a big auditorium, and the wireless worked great in the test, and then they filled up the auditorium and wireless didn't work so great, because once you put the people in there, a lot of the body being a huge amount composed of water, a lot of the signal was absorbed by the bodies that were in the auditorium. So all of these things can cause issues with wireless. Control changes made after installation, and types of changes in application coverage area, RF channel security, transmit power. I want on the wireless, I want an access point near me. That's too fast, too slow, I'm not getting strong enough signal, all those different things you need to have. Change control, change sort of form that they submit that people request changes. I need an application. If we're doing filtering, I need an application to go over the wireless. I need to get to this address over the wireless. I need to be able to access this service over the wireless. All these things need to be documented in a change control request so that you can have those things. So have a change request form to do those things. In order to know how any system is working, you need to establish a baseline. I always go back to maybe something as simple as mileage on your car. How do you know if you're getting poor mileage if you don't know what it started out as? If you start out and you know that your car at one time got 40 miles to the gallon and now it's getting 10, you know you've got a problem. But if it's getting 10 or 12 or 15 and you go by and they say, oh, it can vary and that's not out of the standard for this automobile, you don't know that there's anything wrong with it. Same way with your network. You need to establish a baseline so that you know what's normal before anything abnormal happens into the system. The configuration and the management database, all of the devices that are there, the things that we want to have, document what's there, what's the state, even what the range of these things are. You can do that with a wireless survey, and you don't have to have a lot of sophisticated equipment. You can probably do it with your phone, with the protocol or the wireless analyzers that go into those things, something like Insider, INSSIDER, on your Android device. I don't think there's one yet for the iOS. There are other ones that are available so that you can find the signal strengths, what's going on, where the crossovers happen. Are they interfering with each other? Are they on the same channel or adjacent access points on the same channel? All of those sorts of things. Education and training. The users do share a responsibility, but it's kind of hard to hold them responsible until you've actually trained them on the system, and you need to do those things. The importance of securing the information, the roles that they play in security, like don't sell your password for a candy bar. Don't give away your password or give away access. Don't plug in this rogue access point so somebody can get onto the network. If you see somebody doing those things, report them. You need to have a trained and intelligent work base. Training's got to go on all the time because, as we know, there are constantly changing threats. What is or was a threat today probably won't be tomorrow, but there's going to be something new. And the training, education at set times and on an ad hoc basis, when you go to fix something at somebody's desk, you may want to give them a little refresher on whatever it is that they may need as a refresher. The opportunities, different places, new hires is the biggest place, and many people say HR does a lot of the training, does all the training instead of security. You probably want to try to get yourself into the training program so that you can help with the security training, with how the wireless works, with why it is important, extremely important, that they not give away information, that you'll never send them an email from IT, from the administrator, saying send me your username and password. Works a lot of different times, and we don't want that to happen to our users. We want them to know that if they get one of those, don't do it. Let us know about it, that it's not us that's doing it. How under individuals learn, and this is learning and communication, pedagogical, andragogical, adult learners and non-adult learners is what we're really talking about, and whether they are visual, auditory, or kinesthetic learners. Most of us, I am at least, and I've usually got to mess things up, 10 or 12 times before it actually soaks in how things are supposed to work. But most of the networkers in the world, IT people, really are kinesthetic, hands-on learners. What you need to try to do is provide all the different learning methods for your users so that your visual learners have something to see and read, your auditory learners have something to hear, and that your kinesthetic learners, and probably everybody's going to have the ability to go out and do the actions that you've talked about. This is a table about each of these things, and the desires, the pedagogical and the andragogical. Desire motivated by external pressures. Younger people want the grade. Adult learners, recognition, desire for better quality of life. The student themselves, the younger ones, are dependent upon the teacher for all learning, and the adult learner is usually going to be self-directed, responsible for their own learning. Subject matter defined by what the teacher wants to give in the pedagogical. The adult learner is organized around situations in life or at work, things that were going to help them solve problems. Willingness to learn. Students are informed about what they want to learn, and then in the adult learner, change triggers a readiness to learn, or the students perceive a gap between what they are and where they want to be, where they are and where they want to be, and that's one of the big things that I really want to do this thing. the way with seminars, workshops, print media, internet information, and the internet information used on a daily basis. Problem with internet information, be sure that what you give them is accurate, because back to the old ad, they can't put anything on the internet that's not true. Yeah, right. So be careful about some of those things. The convergence of wireless technologies, as we get further and further into the wireless developments, the different types of wireless are coming closer and closer and closer together. Supporting unification besides the wireless local area network, WiMAX, and the cellular, this says 3G should be 4G, because most places have transitioned, or at least are transitioning from 3G to 4G. WiMAX 802.11.16 standard. It is a long-range wireless. 50 kilometers, 31 miles linear service, line of sight. Shared data rates up to 70 megabits per second. What I want to do, I want to bring in a map here, and this is in my area, which is mountainous, to give you an idea of where availability might be in this area. Again, this is mountainous, but the green areas are where WiMAX, there is a WiMAX provider where it is available. So we go here, this house here is in the area but doesn't have access, and when we just go a few blocks over, then it's available. And this goes several hundred feet up from one location to the other. These areas over here where it's green actually goes up. This area down here is in a lower area. So the transmitters are on a mountaintop, but we have kind of spotty availability of the WiMAX, but it is available in the area. So we can have high speed wireless. The last place that I worked actually used this system. We had multiple sites that we linked together, and we linked it together using the WiMAX protocol, and it worked very nicely. The reason we had to use that, cable wasn't available in all the areas where all of our offices were. Fixed WiMAX, high-speed enterprise, last mile connection, the last miles from the ISP. It's really not just a miles from the ISP to the home. So the last mile in this case is going to be wireless. It could be cable, it could be fiber, it could be a telephone line for DSL, copper phone line for DSL connection. Mobile WiMAX gives us mobility. This thing allows the users to roam indoors and outdoors for kilometers while remaining connected. The one that we're talking about that I showed you the picture of used fixed antennas from site to site. Mobile WiMAX allows you to roam within that area. Cellular is where we're going to on this one. Competing standards, the 802.16e, extension of the 802.16 2004. The 802.20 permit users to roam up to 15 kilometers. It speeds up to 250 kilometers an hour. What we're getting to here is high-speed trains and the ability to put wireless on trains. And the other one, I don't have the number here, but I think it's up to 75 miles an hour. And when you go on the train, if you go on the East Coast on Amtrak, the Washington to New York corridor does have internet access available. The one where I live to Washington doesn't have. Actually, I think one of them does and one of them doesn't. There's two segments there. So what do we put in? What standard are we going to use for those? And lately, cars are advertising that we're putting internet access into cars. Now you can use the 4G LTE to do that, or the 4G, or the cellular. You're going to have a cellular connection. But as we do those things, we're increasing the availability of wireless, and as you increase availability of wireless, particularly in cars, now we're getting to the point that we can have the collision detection, all of those things that vehicle to vehicle wireless, so that we can make everything safer. Or maybe if you're driving and trying to find a restaurant, we'll make things more dangerous by allowing those things to happen. First generation is 9.6, and I think that now we're up to 10, 12, 20 megabits per second for the 4Gs. Those are numbers that are going to continuously change and depend on where you are, what kind of service you're really getting, and we're talking about what can the ISP actually provide. The 4G is supposed to be like 10 times the data rate of the 3G. So those things are all getting better and better and better as we do those things. We talk about the warrior down here. The road warriors are installing a combination 3G and WLAN PC cards. So that, and cell phones are that way now. The smartphones, so that if you're not on a wireless and a non-wireless, you get on the 3G or 4G, and when you come in range of one of your known wireless access points, you transition to the wireless, which is going to be better connectivity for all of these things. Denial of service and numbers. What can we do with these things? And the issues they talk about: attackers listening to voice conversations, and that may be disrupting voice conversations. If you can get onto these things, you may be able to record the packets that have a conversation that somebody may or may not want. Conversations can be corrupted by the attackers when they try to record and modify the packet and send it on. Denial of service by the attackers, and again, you just got to have the right frequency and a little bit of power in order to knock these things out. So you can do that with frequency, with jammers, to do those things. So the summary here, we want to start out with a secure, scalable wireless local area network. With operational support, we're going to monitor, configure management, and educate the user. Education, management, management control, keep logs of what goes on, what you do to systems every time you make a change. Different wireless technologies, and we're getting more and more and more better, faster, broader scope of wireless, so it's becoming a real force in the networking world and the network technologies. And again, down here, make that 4G instead of 3G. With that, I hope this has been useful, and thank you for watching.